Homemade insecticide. Basically what I've got here is some onions from last year, mashed them up and I chopped them with a knife, and there's some old garlic bulbs in there as well, and I've left it to sort of, steep, and basically I take a jam jar out, and as you can see that's the liquid I'm using, and I put a couple of the jam jars into my watering can, top it up, and anywhere where I see ants nests around, or anywhere where I think insects are attacking my plants, I sort of put this mixture around it. It seems to be working. The only problem is don't put it directly on plants, it will scorch your plants, but around them it seems to deter. This year has been the first year that the raspberries have really come into their own. When I took this plot on, there were a lot of raspberries, as you can see here, but they were very weak and straggly and they were at the back of the plot. So what I did is I lifted all the very young ones up I could find and I put them on a line here. And this is the western end of the plot, and basically at this particular end of the plot they're much more likely, as you can see if you come in on the flowers, that they're much more successful. And I've fertilised them along the line. I've used some chicken feed on them, and I've put some chippings, and luckily there's a chap here who, if you put a notice up, you get some chippings. Always seem to find old coins here. Might be an old sixpence or something of a lower denomination, but it's always exciting, isn't it? You just never know, do you? Always get excited, Viking treasure or something. Right, this is where I put the berries. I have red currants and black currants, but mostly all along this line here are gooseberries, and there's red gooseberries, large ones. There's a plant which was past this thistle here, which I've just treated with a little bit of dilute vinegar, beetroot vinegar actually, which had some rust on it, mildew basically. And at the moment it's not too bad. So basically I've just put a bit of vinegar onto it, a bit of beetroot vinegar onto it. You can use, I've tried at home, milk by diluting milk out. Apparently the milk protein, they don't like it. But these are doing very well, and some of them are in flower. Some of the red currants and black currants are in flower, probably red currant plants there, and so they haven't yet been fertilised, but some of the gooseberries have already taken top. Last year was a bumper year for gooseberries. This year may not be as great, but it seems like this year is going to be a much better year for currants. These currants here in the process of being fertilised, and such as these ones here, which are quite pendulous really, quite pleased with them. Various types of cherry trees as well, Stella and sour cherry and morellos as well, and they've done okay this year. These are just dwarfs, in other words they're on a rootstock. Number of people have commented about their stringy beans being attacked, mine the same. I've dosed these right round on the outside of them with vinegar in case it's ants. I'm not sure what it is. We've had some terrible problems with slugs beneath the soil, but I'm loath to put any pellets down. But these aren't first generation. These are ones I've just planted them every year from the actual pods themselves. So maybe they're just not vigorous enough. Maybe they just haven't got that genetic resistance anymore. Onions have done okay this year. We planted them fairly early, and it's Stuttgarter and also Sturons, and some red onions as well, and they've been doing okay. I'm not a massive fan of Jerusalem artichokes, so basically what I've done is I found they're incredibly invasive, and this is like a trench to dig out some of the last of them. I've dug about 50 or 60 of these trenches around to get rid of it. I'm just not a fan of them, so instead I've been trying on the other plot to grow some chicory, which I'd much prefer. All along the line where the slabs are between me and another plot, I've put my beetroot vinegar or vinegar and garlic mixture, because I've seen ants nest underneath the slabs, and people have told me apparently that they just don't like acid, so because ants make their own acid, and basically it'll disrupt the trails as they're trying to go across. Although it doesn't seem to be a brilliant year for gooseberries for me, it seems to me that the strawberries might be okay this year. Some of these are nearly ripe, and I'll just keep an eye on them as I go along. I will be getting some gooseberries. Probably the younger plants are going to give me a better crop than the older ones at the western end of the... Planted these some years ago. We still winter when I planted them, and I can remember vicious northerly winds sweeping across them, so it had to be protected with fleece. But these red currants, and some of them are black currants on the end of the line, have done extremely well this year. And despite the fact it's been incredibly wet and almost monsoon conditions, and some people in North Notts told me there wasn't any frost at all in winter, and suddenly the frost came down in late winter and even in April, and we had some shocking frost in May, which did for my Ulan Gage, the 3 trees, which I mentioned in a previous blog, 1, 2 and 3, my 3 sentinels. I'll only get 50 or 60 if I'm lucky off the 3 trees instead of hundreds. My fault, because I didn't fleece them during the May time. I should have put a protective fleece around them, and I noticed on the continent when I looked it up on YouTube, growers have had to use burners overnight on their crops to protect them. Always fancied some juniper berries, so I bought this juniper plant because it did have some berries on it, very small, from a garden centre. It's supposed to be more high end, this one. I don't know how to survive on the clay soil. We'll have to see, but I just fancied the idea of trying some juniper berries. These plants really love it down here near the river. It's a Kentish cob, and when I first bought them in the garden centre, the guy said you had to have the Kentish and another one, which is another cobnut as well. And this is what he meant, you had to have this purple one as well. And together, apparently they work very well. They have catkins. A more mature specimen of a Kentish cob I've got here down the end. This has been in about 3 years. Not had any crop off it yet, but then it, I'm looking to get one maybe next year. Rhubarb, of course, highly reliable down here, but from what I've learned from people, you cannot crop just anything. You've got to be careful that you get the stalks, which are... These are wild blackberries, which I've cultivated myself. I found various blackberry growing around my garden, and anything sort of crept around and through or landed, carried by birds, and they have vicious thorns, and they grow wild, they very well, but there are many different varieties of blackberries in Britain, but these produce particularly large, very tasty berries. But of course it's you get all your arms lacerated, but I'm sure the goodness that comes out of the berries, if you've cleaned yourself up, more than makes up for the damage to yourself and your scratches in picking them. But this will be the first year these along here will have produced a very decent crop. Last year I had some of a crop, but more at the back where I've also cultivated blackberries as well, and the wildness, of course. And I've put up some bird boxes, and I don't know whether anything's nesting in them. I haven't seen anything yet, but maybe they might shelter overnight, or baby birds might take shelter in them. There's 3 of them along the line. Some of them are a bit more covert than other ones. Hybrid berries can grow extremely well, and they seem to be very, very disease resistant and very vigorous. And this particular tayberry has been a very heavy cropper, and it's sort of got spread its sort of progeny all around. And the same with cherry trees. I've planted some cherry stones from wild cherries I've seen, or cherry plants around. If I'm travelling around and I see a cherry tree and it's got some fruit on it, I might try some and then see if I can grow from seed, and they often do. I don't know whether these will be any good. I can always, control their height and see if I can get a crop from them. But these berries, I just love these tayberries. They're incredibly tasty, well worth the effort of growing. Again, very thorny and vigorous plant. I tried a different variety of rhubarb, and this one's called Red Champagne. When I tried the taste test at home, it's slightly more acid, more tangy, and less stringy. But however, the older one that's been on here a lot longer on the site, as long as you cut it early, I think wins slightly. But this one I think will hold out its flavour longer throughout the year, so I can see why people like it. It's just that with the older variety, if you leave it longer than about, say, July around here, it does get incredibly stringy, soft, and not very tasty at all. But this is the Red Champagne. It's only 3 years old, so basically I've taken a bit of a crop from it, but what's left here is a bit too stringy to take any more, so I have to wait for maybe a couple of weeks before I crop this rhubarb again. What I did is I made some rhubarb and put some crumble mixture on top inside little aluminium trays, baked them, and it was I needed about 45 minutes on a medium to hot oven around about 180 degrees, and then when you take them out you let them cool down and freeze them, so they've been cooked and then put away frozen, and that's using these little aluminium containers that come with like cardboard tops on them, similar to what you get in a takeaway, so that way you can keep it for longer.